Hi guys, I'm Lauren, that awkward plant girl. Welcome to my channel. It's so good to see you guys. Thank you guys for popping in. Today we're going to be talking about Ceropegia Woodii, how to take care of them, how to propagate them. There's a whole bunch of different varieties of Ceropegia out there. Notably, most talked about is string of hearts and variegated string of hearts. You'll see the beautiful pink heart-shaped foliage just kind of floating around everywhere, making these big beautiful curtains. I have grown mine out from a single little cutting I got over a year ago, and I've just kind of grown it out and propagated, and that's how I have what I have. So we're going to talk about their care, their propagation, and all that jazz. So if it's a plant that you constantly kill, or if you've been struggling with it quite a bit, then stick around because this will probably help you out a little bit, or at least give you some general ideas of maybe some of the stuff that you can change up a little bit to make it a little bit easier for you. So Ceropegia are actually from South Africa. They were discovered on a mountaintop there. They're a creeping, trailing plant. They grow on rock faces and kind of trail down. They can also handle colder temperatures and will actually bloom in the summer and fall. So you can see their little teeny tiny blooms, and then when their blooms are pollinated, they'll actually become little seed pods, which is really cool, and they'll have little dandelion seeds almost in there. So they'll have like the little tufts like a dandelion attached to the seed, and when they are spreading, they rely on the wind to spread them and carry them, just like dandelions do. So they're really cool, really fun, really easy to propagate, whether you're using seeds or whether you're actually going to be taking cuttings. So let's talk about propagation of these plants really quick. So when you're going to propagate a Ceropegia, you are going to need a node, which is where the two leaves come together, and that little ball right there. They can grow roots from that, and they can also produce a whole new set of leaves. That's where all the building blocks for producing more of this plant is in that one little teeny tiny nodule called a node. So you will need one of those. What I have found to be the best practice, honestly, is to root it in water. I know this is going to cause some controversy. There is a lot of different ways to root this plant, okay? So what has been used in the past is basically chopping it up, having a single node with two leaves, and just sticking it in what is called the butterfly method in some sphagnum moss or some perlite, and then letting it grow out that way in a high humidity environment like a closed up box or something. They do need a lot of light when you're trying to propagate them. So that way they can produce a lot more plant for you a lot more quick. What I have discovered works better is actually taking a cutting of it, having one or two nodes, putting it in water, and then having 2 or 3 nodes that actually have foliage still to absorb that light. And what that's going to do is feed the plant. It's going to have it produce the roots, and then it will be able to produce new growth much more quickly than trying to produce roots all by itself with minimal leaves and then produce more growth to get more energy to grow more roots. So the second part is what happens when you leave it with just 2 leaves and a node, sticking it in sphagnum moss. It actually works better if you take the cuttings and put them in the water. You can also take the cuttings and have multiple strands and put them in the sphagnum moss, or you can put them in some type of perlite. I've even heard of people using vermiculite. I have not tried that yet myself, but definitely recommend water. Super easy. Just give them as much light as possible. Don't let that water dry. That's pretty much it. Don't let it completely empty and dry out, because then your roots will be gone. But the water will produce enough humidity and they'll be able to get a lot of light, and it just works so well with this particular plant. Another means of propagating it, if you're trying to get more strands, is you can actually loop the strand up the top of the pot and around, and then you can wait for it to root, and then you cut in between those, and every single one of those nodes will produce new growth, and that way you can get a much fuller plant doing it that way. So it's a lot easier. It's slower than the other methods talked about, but it is a lot easier to do. So, and it's less inconvenient if you don't want to constantly be refilling water bottles or worry about having them grow in a box or something. Definitely a really, really easy plant to propagate though, and well worth the effort. This is Ceropegia Woodii variegata, where it has the pink and it's got the white, and the more sun you give it, the more pink it's going to get. They will trail and get tangled, so be prepared to untangle them. And then this one over here is a string of arrows, and then this one is a string of daggers. And then over here is your standard string of hearts, and then we've got your string of needles over here, all of which are Ceropegia, all of which require the same amount of care. As much light as you can possibly give it. Let it dry out completely. When it needs water, the leaves will be a little bit more flexible, not as thick and succulent. They are an evergreen succulent, so they will constantly grow all year round, but they will grow a little bit more with the more light that they get. The more light that they get, the faster they're going to be growing. Because they grow on rock interfaces, they get that direct sunlight right on top of them, and that's where they kind of grow and creep into the crags. They can handle cooler temperatures or warmer temperatures, but they definitely love their humidity because they're on a rocky interface with a lot of moss and creepy cragglies, you know. So it's going to be very moist there as far as the humidity grows. So they really, really love that. And if you do end up trying to propagate them in the pot, definitely recommend taking like some plastic wrap and putting that over top there, and that'll help them grow a little bit as well. So if you're struggling with that, definitely recommend. When they start to get these long internodes in between, it's just saying that it's not receiving enough light. What you can do is go ahead and chop it off and propagate it, and then regrow those out with more light, and they won't have as much space in between. They'll have a shorter distance between the leaves. And when you do chop them, I realize I'm talking about propagating them a lot, but that's basically how you get a full pot. You'll see a lot of people where they'll have these big strings, these big curtains, and then there will be nothing on top. It'll basically be bald. So if you want a nice full pot, this is how you're going to be doing it. So that's why I'm talking about it so much. When you go and you chop it, wherever you chop it, make sure that that is where you want to be chopping it, because it will divide into two. So what I recommend is going all the way up to the top, where there is just one or two leaves or nodes left over, and then kind of chop there, because it's going to divide and make more. And then every time you chop it from there, it's going to divide into two even more. So you can, this is like purposeful pruning. Bonsai growers do it all the time. So this is just kind of their technique for their trees that I have adapted to houseplants. And it's just purposeful pruning, just the way that you're going to be pruning the plant. Prune it mindfully, so that way while you're propagating, you're getting the plant to grow the way you want it to grow. And these plants are fantastic for that, because it's very easily predictable what they're going to be doing. But there is a wide variety of them, and they do get more sun stress the more light you give them. For the most part, they'll either get more sparkly, more silver, more pink, more deep purple. It depends on the variety that you have, but the backs will usually change a color, or the fronts will change a color, and then one side will stay green and the other side will get more of whatever color that particular plant has and brings out. Regardless, it's worth it, giving it as much light as you possibly can. What I have these plants in front of is a big western facing window. So they get bright, direct afternoon sunlight shining down on them as strong as it can possibly get. And they get it for a good, I want to say 6 hours a day at least. So in the summertime, it's even more. And that's what makes the color pop. If you are a crocheter or a knitter, or somebody who loves to do little teeny tiny intricate crafts with yarn, you're going to love these plants, because they need to be untangled all the time. So if you're one of those people that likes to sit down and really focus and untangle things, you are going to love these plants. Because every time you want to straighten out your curtain because it's grown so much, it's going to take 15-20 minutes to untangle even a tiny plant. So just fair warning in advance. Now, what do we grow these plants in? We're actually growing them in basically a cacti soil. They just need a well-draining mix. Because they are on rock faces and cliff faces on mountainsides, they do not sit in a lot of water. All the water just kind of runs down past them. They like a lot of humidity, but they don't need a lot of water. They have a bulbous root system. That's why they have the nickname rosary beads, because they have these little teeny tiny bulbs that'll grow under the nodes, and that's where their roots are going to come from. But those bulbs will hold on to a water for a really, really long time. So they don't need water very often, and they need a well-draining mix, so that way they're not sitting in a puddle, because they don't sit in puddles. That's not how they do it. So just get them a cacti mix, or do like 50% perlite, 50% peat. You can also do something with charcoal and sphagnum moss in it a little bit with some perlite, and that would work really well as well too. As long as you're giving them the opportunity to dry out before you water them, they will be perfectly fine. Also, they don't need a lot of fertilizer, so you can just give them a little bit of Osmocote or fish fertilizer, fish emulsion, whatever you're giving your plants, just give them a little bit occasionally. They don't need a whole lot. They're not like a Monstera where they need to be fed all the time. But they are beautiful plants. They're super fast growers. All you have to do is just let them dry out. Don't overwater them, and make sure that they're getting enough light. And they're super easy. Even here in the Pacific Northwest, they have survived my winters and still grown just fine. I've had them in my living room just under a grow light. Really, the only way to kill them is to give them no light whatsoever and to overwater them constantly. I mean, they survive mountain crevices, guys. So they're very, very hardy plants, and they love to grow. So definitely just give them a chance. You can get them fairly inexpensively now, and even if you get just a small strand or a small pot or a cutting, they're going to grow really, really quickly for you. I actually just got one strand of each for my variegated and my non-variegated, and they grew like crazy just within a year. And I've given away cuttings too, guys. It's not like I've kept it all for myself and this is all that there was. There was so much more, and I just keep giving it because it was expensive for a while there. So, you know, you want your friends to have it and be able to enjoy it as well. So definitely just another reason to love this plant. Anyway, hopefully this made this plant a little less intimidating for you. Hopefully you can enjoy it a little bit more. Gave you some idea of the varieties out there. If you're not a big fan of pink, there are other colors. Or if you love pink, then, you know, you've definitely seen this and you have to get it. And now you know how to care for it. Anyway, I hope you guys have an amazing day. I will see you in the next one. Bye!